Good morning and welcome to Red River Unitarian Universalist Church here in Denison, Texas. We welcome you to our Sunday presentation. We have a wonderful new guest speaker today, and we're looking forward to our time together. For our call to community, this is by Jane E. Malden. For our community gathered here, for the Spirit called us together and drew us to this place. We give thanks this day. For moments we have shared with others, for times when we have reached out across barriers of distance and fear, for times when others have reached out to us, for moments when we have discovered another along our path. We give thanks this day. For this community of celebration and growth, of introspection and solitude, and for those moments of that peace which passes all understanding, we give thanks this day. For our gathering together out of distant places, for our weaving together out of many separate selves, this hour of celebration and worship, we give thanks this day. As is our usual practice, we welcome you to come and light a candle for a joy, a challenge, or just to bring more light into the room. Please do so while we sit in stillness, listening to the prelude.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from demons and you can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard life. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm so happy to be here with you today. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for our chalice lighting and for our spoken affirmation. We light the chalice this morning. Let's go ahead and light it. All right, here we go. This flame, a symbol of the fire in our hearts, this fire that we inherited from those who loved us and stretched us into this moment, from those who sparked a passion for justice and for compassion that calls us into action. This fire that connects us as we gather from our separate spaces, this fire that sustains us as we build community today and capacity for tomorrow's work, that we in turn might bequeath this fire to those who follow us in building the world that we dream about and in bending the world and Texas towards justice. And I'll also invite you to join us as we remind ourselves of the affirmation, a cornerstone of our free faith tradition, and it's displayed on the screen and in your program. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. I invite you to be seated. And our opening thought today comes from the Reverend Leslie Ahuva Fales. And she says, "You are sacred. Your choice to give birth, your choice to end a pregnancy, your conflicted feelings, your confident decision, each of them sacred. Your choice is sacred." And we'll listen to a song from Karen Drucker.
Listen, 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 listen. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. So listen, 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 listen. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. So the earth will be healed by the women of the world. The earth will be healed by the women of the world. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. So listen, 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 listen. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. So the earth will be healed by the women of the world. The earth will be healed by the women of the world. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. So the earth will be healed by the women of the world. The earth will be healed by the women of the world. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. So the earth will be healed by the women of the world. The earth will be healed by the women of the world. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. So the earth will be healed by the women of the world. The earth will be healed by the women of the world. A woman feels her power when her voice is being heard. Listen. Listen.
We will do a responsive reading now, which is a ritual for reproductive choice. And Jan will lead the congregational response. I'll mention everything with consent. If you don't feel like reading the congregational response, that's totally fine. And this is from the Reverend Julia Hamilton. Let me know when you're ready, Jan.
I'm ready.
Okay, awesome. So the sanctuary we're creating together is a container for all of our stories, the ones we share and the ones we hold close and quiet in our hearts. The stories that bring us joy and fulfillments, and the stories that break us open. The stories that change and grow with us, and the stories that we outgrow and leave behind. And each and every one of us carries a lifetime of stories every time you enter this space. And so this morning, it could be that there are stories from your life that surface in unexpected ways. And so I invite us into this ritual to hold space for all the stories, whatever they may be. And so you may join in the congregational response or simply listen and let the words sink into your body. And if you need support after this service, reach out. I'll be here at the coffee hour. Reach out to each other. And so as I name the different paths we've taken, if you recognize yourself in one of these prayers, I invite you, again, everything with consent, to put your hand over your heart, wherever you are, and know that you are not alone, that there's someone else in the gathered community that's holding their hand over their heart too. And so I hold space for those whose story includes the choice to end a pregnancy. Circumstances vary, the timelines of our lives are diverse, but each and every end is also a beginning. And so I hold in love all who have aborted a pregnancy or partnered someone in abortion for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
And the congregation responds, may the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
I hold space for those whose story includes the unwanted loss of a pregnancy or a struggle with fertility. The circumstances vary. The timelines of our lives are diverse. But the pain of infertility, of miscarriage, of stillbirth are too often held in silence. And so I hold in love all who have traveled this path of loss for whatever reason and under whatever circumstance.
And the congregation responds,
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in
unconditional love and acceptance.
I hold space for those whose story includes the choice to give birth. The circumstances vary. The timelines of our lives are diverse. But the choice to bring a new life into the world is a powerful one. And I hold in love all who have given birth, partnered in the birth of a child, those who have adopted a child birthed by someone else, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
And the congregation responds, may the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
I hold space for those whose story includes the choice not to conceive or have children. Circumstances vary. The timelines of our lives are diverse. But the freedom to chart the course of our own reproductive life is sacred. I hold in love all who have made the decision not to conceive or bear children for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
The congregation responds, may the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
I hold space for those whose story includes a forced choice, or no choice at all, or who have encountered violence where there should have been tenderness and care. Circumstances vary. The timelines of our lives are diverse, but not everyone has been in the position to control their own reproductive choices. And so I hold in love all who have found themselves unable to exercise their sacred reproductive freedom for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances.
And the congregation responds, may our beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
And finally, I hold space for those whose reproductive story is still being written. Circumstances vary. The timelines of our lives are diverse. But the future unfolds in surprising and unexpected ways that can be both beautiful and heartbreaking. And so I hold in love all who are at the threshold, who have agency and choices still to make about their reproductive lives, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances.
And the congregation responds, may the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
And so may those many stories we've lifted up today remind us of the fire of commitment that we carry inside to ensure that all people have freedom and agency over their bodies, over their reproductive choices, and that reproductive justice is upheld as a fundamental right for this and future generations. Okay, so.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you,
Building bridges
will you
between
reach
our
out to me?
divisions, I
With
reach out to
all
you,
of our
will you
voices
reach
and all
out
of our
to me?
visions,
With
sisters,
all
we
of our
can make
voices
such
and
sweet
all of our
harmony.
visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, with all of our voices and all of our visions, with all of our voices and all of our visions, sisters, we can make such sweet harmony.
Building bridges between our
Building bridges
divisions, I
between
reach
our
out to you,
divisions,
will
I
you
reach out to you, will you
With
reach
all
out
of
to
our
me?
voices
With
and
all
all
of our voices and
sisters,
all
we
of
can
our
make
visions,
such
sisters,
sweet
we can
harmony.
make such sweet
Building
harmony.
bridges between our
Building bridges
divisions, I
between
reach
our
out to you,
divisions,
will
I
you
reach out to
me?
you, will you
With
reach
all
out
of
to
our
me?
voices
With
and
all of our
visions,
voices and
sisters,
all
we
of our
can make
visions,
such
sisters,
sweet
we can
harmony.
make such sweet
Sisters, we can
harmony.
make such
Sisters,
sweet
we can make
harmony.
such
Sisters,
sweet
we can
harmony.
make such
Sisters,
sweet
we can
harmony.
make such. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony.
Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony.
Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Sisters, we can make such sweet harmony. Hey.
Woo! Air five.
Lay it out.
Here. All right. So we move into a space of meditation and prayer. Take a moment to relax yourself in your seat. Adopt a posture that works for you. As I read a prayer from Adrienne Marie Brown. When we are engaged in acts of love, we humans are at our best and most resilient. The love and romance that makes us want to be better people. The love of children that makes us change our whole lives to meet their needs. The love of family that makes us drop everything to take care of them. The love of community that makes us work tirelessly, even with broken hearts. Perhaps humans' core function is love. Love leads us to observe in a much deeper way than any other emotion. If love were the central practice of a new generation of organizers and spiritual leaders, it could have a massive impact. If the goal was to increase the love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everyone we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through eyes of love. We would see that there is no such thing as a blank canvas, an empty land, or a new idea, but everywhere there is complex, ancient, fertile ground, full of potential. We would understand that the strength of our movement is in the strength of our relationships, which could only be measured by their depth. Scaling up would mean going deeper, being more vulnerable and more empathetic. I will take a moment of silence to hold meditation and prayer.
I know my fear will burn away.
I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this loss will go away. I
We'll move into a second reading that is from the sister song, Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. And they met in January 20th through 22nd last year, 2023, in Atlanta, Georgia. They had a summit that took place on what would have been the 50th anniversary of the Roe versus Wade decision that legalized abortion. And as you know, this decision was overturned in 2022, and that led to the loss of legal abortion in half of the country. And so they revisited their idea of reproductive justice and envisioned a new future. And here is what they declared. So when I say we, it's they. We declare, we choose us. We invoke the spirit of our ancestors who cleared the path for us, comrades who fight alongside us today, and those who will fight beyond us, who will become our greatest dreams. And we reclaim the demands of reproductive justice that our Black foremothers named nearly 30 years ago. The human right to own our bodies and control our future. The human right to have children. The human right not to have children. And the human right to parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. We are still fighting for these rights to be real in our lives. We know things are not okay. We have a lot of work to do. We need you to join our fight so we can make this dream a reality. And here ends the reading. And so we have stories, hopes, dreams, the needs of women and of the broader group of people who are capable of becoming pregnant. I want to name, I use that, people becoming capable of becoming pregnant because it includes gender-expansive people, trans men, non-binary people, and sadly it also includes children and youth. So there's nothing offensive about saying people who are capable of becoming pregnant. And the complexity of reproductive lives also includes the stories, the hopes, the dreams of those who have been impacted by pregnancy, children, partners, siblings, and parents. For this reason, when the Banksons, who are a great musician, husband and wife, did a piece called Sovereignty Hymns, they spoke to a lot of different people. They had a lot of different stories of ectopic pregnancy, of secret abortions that were held in shame and fear in families, the stories of miscarriages, the stories of abortion of a very much wanted child who was experiencing, who was not developing properly and had medical complications. Listening to these stories is hard work that prepares us for the work of our hands and our minds. It's so important to have that movement of the heart that gives us the passion and gives us the knowledge of what's going on and what's real in people's lives. So listen, it's a story from the Hebrew Bible. It's about a childless widow. Her name is Tamar. She has, in that time, they have levirate marriage. And so the way that works is that the oldest surviving brother is expected to give her the child where her dead husband failed to do so. And so her brother-in-law, Onan, he's not happy with this arrangement because this child is not going to be his. It's going to be his brother's, and he's going to lose his inheritance. And so he lets his seed go to waste, the great sin of Onanism. In a case of biblical plot magic, God smites Onan. And Tamar's father-in-law, Judah, is a bit shook by all this. He's lost 2 sons. He only has 1 left. And so he tells her, oh, no, my youngest son, he's way too young. Go to your parents' house, wait. I'll send him to you when he's old enough. And so she waits and waits and waits. And it becomes quite clear that Judah will never allow his son to marry her. And so she takes the situation into her own hands. She tricks Judah when he's out on the road into thinking that she's a ritual prostitute. And in this encounter, he doesn't have any money. She says, well, what do you have? He says, well, I have my seal. And so he gives her his seal. And then he moves on. He's been shearing sheep. And he goes back with that. Doesn't even think about this prostitute he met on the road. But several months later, the widow Tamar is pregnant. She's a woman. She's a pregnant woman. So her sexual life is public in a way that Judah's was not, in a way that Onan's was not. Her body is not her own. Just as in this culture, a visibly pregnant person triggers this sense of ownership. You can't do this and you must do that, and differing punishments for the person if they have substance abuse, for example. In this time, her body was also not her own. And there's a public outcry. Now, at this time and place in the world, the penalty for adultery, which is what, oh, you're pregnant, so you must have committed adultery, it's burning. And so Judah he's ready, she committed adultery. And then she sends her a note with his seal and says, hey, this is the guy who impregnated me. I go, oh, okay. Execution canceled. And he says, She is more in the right than I. This is a kind of a weird story with a lot of ethical weird stuff going on. But of all of those involved, she was the one who was living out the ethics of the day. And what's interesting is that her motivations in the story are never really revealed. What is it to have something of her dead husband, to have the financial security of his inheritance? Maybe she just wants a baby. This is the only way she can have one. But it's really none of our business because it's her body, it's her child. And so this story is really a reproductive story. It's a story of a woman who exercised her own reproductive power, even though she knew, aside from the body changes and the risk of pregnancy itself, that she risked being burned to death. Now, the term reproductive justice itself first came about because of a failure to listen. It came about in 1994. The International Conference on Population and Development determined that the individual right to family planning was central to global development. But the women's rights movement of that time was dominated by middle class and wealthy white women. And so the focus was on legal rights, on individual choice, and it didn't factor in differences in power or privilege or history. Listen, this story from my mother's life. Her Aunt Bud's sister was married to a very handsome magazine model. He was the Arrow shirt man. Some people here remember Arrow shirts. And this guy traveled around everywhere. But every time he came home, somehow Bud's sister ended up pregnant. And Bud was like, this is ridiculous. And so she arranged for Margaret Sanger to go visit her sister and explain family planning. Now, I don't know whether it stuck, but my mother remembers visiting this household as a child. This would have been the early 1950s. Her aunt, no Arrow shirt man in sight, 10 or more children. Now, my mother was an only child, so 6 could have looked like 10, I don't know, but nevertheless, a lot of kids. And what seemed to her as abject poverty, epitomized by having to go to the bathroom in an outhouse in the 1950s in Connecticut. So now I only have my mother's perspective in this story. This story is more complex than what I'm telling you, and it's quite possible her aunt was perfectly happy. But this really touched my mother, and she was pretty adamant that all my siblings, especially my brother, had access to effective contraception options. And I'll mention here, just because someone's using contraception doesn't mean they won't get pregnant.
Amen.
It's pretty common. And over time, because when you think about failure rates of contraception, that's for 1 year. Most people who are sexually active are not sexually active for 1 year. And so those contraception failure rates, they increase over time. They compound over time. And so I want to take this idea of you weren't responsible. Just leave that away, because that's probably in most cases not accurate. But my mother's story makes me think about privilege. Privilege is like walking through doorways that appear only for you, and the next person who comes through finds a hurdle or an opaque wall. And she had relative wealth and privilege that gave us the gift of choice. She had wealth and privilege that gave me benefits, such as adequate health care when I did choose to have children. In the United States, Black women suffer disproportionately high pregnancy-related deaths. In a study from 2006 to 2010, it's comparing Black women to white and Latina women. It was 3 times higher. See, this is crisis. Also, Black infants die at more than twice the rate of white infants. Again, a crisis level. And then even after, as you're growing up in a family, generational wealth provided me with financial security that impacted my family's quality of life. And so I looked to my experience to think about why social location, compassion, and empathy is so important to ethical and moral decision making, which is what, when we decide about justice issues, we're doing. If I don't have compassion to look beyond my own social location and the empathy to seek out and to try to understand other folks' stories, I'm not attuned to the basic facts that people live with. I don't have the facts to determine what's that proper ethical question, much less potential resolutions. And so that's why justice work is best done in community. Now, we were talking about this conference on population and development, and the foremothers of the reproductive justice movement, they knew that this framework, this white women's framework, was not for them, did not contemplate them. There were ways that white women owned their own bodies, had agency over their own bodies, that these foremothers did not. And so a group of Black women met in Chicago in 1994, and they named the needs of the most marginalized women, families, and communities, and organized a national movement that was for them. And we read their demands: the right to control and own one's own body and future, the right to have children that live and don't kill the parent when you're having the child, the right not to have children, the right to parent children in safe and sustainable communities. And this reproductive justice framework, it says these rights are a human right. We're not looking at just, is it a legal right? We're examining the systems and people's actual lives. And we ask, is this right real? Is there actually access to the right that we're saying is there? Now, Unitarian Universalist values call us to proclaim each person's individual worth. This call moves us to seek freedom and liberation for each person, including bodily autonomy, and to wonder, what are the threats to bodily autonomy? And what are the root causes? How far back do I go? What do I need to change? And so reproductive justice is really aligned because it wants us to actively understand the lives of people who don't experience their bodies and their personhood as their own, of those who experience coerced choices, and then to take action to dismantle the system that's doing this. Listen, Nurse Dawn Wooten worked at an ICE facility in Georgia. She alleged that a doctor at the facility was performing hysterectomies on detained women without proper consent. Now, the investigation, such as it was, and there was like a congressional panel, revealed that there were 2 hysterectomies. ICE claimed they were medically necessary, but this is happening in the wake of a long history of forced sterilization and eugenics. The idea that certain people should have children and others should not have children. And it lasted longer than many people think, into the 1970s. We think about it as like the 30s, but It's estimated that as many as 25 to 50% of Native American women were sterilized between 1970 and 1976. And this movement impacted and targeted African Americans, Mexican Americans, and I'm gonna kind of take a dive into Puerto Rico, because over 1/3 of all women were sterilized as the United States colonized Puerto Rico. Now, Iris Lopez is a researcher who interviewed Puerto Rican women in New York City. And she found a couple of things. She found that many women agreed to the procedure because of economic pressure. She found that they would go to their healthcare providers, and their providers just didn't have any reversible birth control on offer. The only thing they offered was sterilization. And in her paper, she says, they talked about the burglaries, the lack of hot water in the winter, the dilapidated environment in which they live. Additionally, mothers are constantly worried about the adverse effect that the environment might have on their children. Their neighborhoods are poor with high rates of visible crime and substance abuse. Often, women claim that they were sterilized because they could not tolerate having children in such an adverse environment. So, this, I hope, brings into the picture the idea of parenting the children that you have in safe and sustainable communities. They had a choice, but that wasn't a real choice. So aside from the right to one's own reproductive potential, the right to have children also includes access to culturally sensitive birthing options, adequate prenatal and pregnancy care, and postpartum care, because pregnancy does do a number on a pregnant person's body. Now, your state justice ministry, which I am the intern minister of, the TXUUJM Justice Ministry, we call it TXUUJM as for short, we engaged in the 2023 legislative session, and Jan participated, and some of others of you might have, on this really critical issue of maternal mortality, which is a racial justice issue. So we participated in the coalition that advocated for HB 12, which mitigates, it doesn't fix, it mitigates the crisis of Black maternal mortality by extending postpartum Medicaid coverage from 2 to 12 months. And it passed this year. We can celebrate that, yes. It has been approved by the federal government, so it's going to go into effect on March 1st, 2024. And y'all from Oklahoma, y'all got it earlier than we did. Oklahoma has had this since January 1st of 2023. But do you know what didn't pass? A much lower profile and important bill. It would have funded a pilot program that would have provided doula care for Medicaid recipients. Now, doulas help pregnant people navigate the healthcare system, and this system is frequently hostile, actively hostile to Black people and other pregnant people of color. And so doulas provide education and support throughout pregnancy. Listen, a Black couple from Dallas were unhappy with how they were treated in hospitals with their prior births. And so they had a home birth with a licensed midwife and doulas. The mother, Tamisha Jackson, shared, I had a team of doulas who were texting my phone, making sure I'm eating properly, checking in on my mental health, checking in on how I'm doing physically, all through my prenatal. So they went to their well baby checkup a few days after birth, and their pediatrician was concerned because the child had jaundice. This is a common condition for newborn children. It can be treated in hospital or at home, and the couple wanted to treat the baby at home with their midwife. And the pediatrician freaked out because he thought that baby should be treated in a hospital. Of course, what's the next thing you do? Called CPS. That's exactly what happened, and some of you might remember this story. So, and of course, CPS removed the baby.
Which they would not have done had they been white.
Yes, so we have this racial aspect. Thank you. And for the recording, a congregant said that CPS would likely not have removed that baby if it had been a white baby. The pediatrician might not even have reported them. So this baby was almost a month away from their parents. One of the most critical months of a baby's life. And this was after public outcry. So how many families have experienced this kind of coercion that we don't even know about? So that is a story where the state separated families by removing children. Our justice system separates families by removing parents from homes. We have parents, not just mothers, who are in jail awaiting trial because they cannot make bail. We have parents in prison for nonviolent crimes. I'm not going to get into that whole thing. I'll come back. We'll talk about the social construction of crime. But what I want to lift up here is, again, that fourth tenet, the human right to parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities, that calls us to grapple with these realities of racism, of economic inequality, of the lives that are targeted by oppressive systems. And it calls us to wonder, what would it take to eradicate poverty? What would it take to create livable, sustainable communities? And what's my part in it? Now, you have probably noticed we've been talking about reproductive justice all this time, and I haven't even hardly mentioned abortion. And abortion care is healthcare. Abortion care is life-saving. Abortion care is critical. And just as Tamar's motivations for having a child really aren't any of our business, neither are a pregnant person's reasons for not having a child. I'd like to invite you to our monthly book group where we're reading Reverend Dr. Rebecca Todd Peters' book, Trust Women, a progressive Christian argument for reproductive justice. And we can dig into these topics a little more. And Peters, one of the things that she says that I think is really important is she talks about a justification framework of, you have to justify why you're going to have an abortion. And she says, no, we need to, women are wise, the song said. She says, we need to trust the agency and the moral judgment of pregnant people to make their own decisions about their bodies. That body is not a public resource. As I was coming in here today, I saw these flags and I was like, oh no, this is a white crosses thing. Is 2,600 abortions is what these flags represent? Why are 2,600 lives, sorrows, challenges, any of that church's business? Whose body is it? So I kind of got y'all all head up a little bit, but I want to invite you to return to a place of curiosity and wonder. Because as Adrienne Marie Brown says, what if we look through the eyes of love? We're not looking for opponents. We're not looking for a war. We're looking for relationship. We're looking for connection. And really having faith and believing that when we do this, we can open up new possibilities of community and of mutual care, of listening to stories that open our moral imaginations so that we envision and build a more livable community for all of us. May it be so. Blessed be and amen.
Thank you so very much, Sarah. Thank you. We go now to our time of giving. And I'm quoting Arthur Foote. Freely have we received of gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit. Gladly we bring to our church and its wide concerns a portion of this bounty. While we have music from Dan, the bowl awaits, or you may donate online. Thank you. Thank you. If you will watch the screen, we are doing There Is More Love Somewhere with the Jason Shelton Choir. There's more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There's more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. And Sarah, we want to thank you for coming to join us this week and giving us such a wonderful gift from
you.
Red River Unitarian
Oh my goodness,
Universalist.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So for our closing thought, I would invite you to rise in body or spirit for the closing words and extinguishing the chalice. And the closing thought is a prayer for living in tension by Tension, tension, by Joseph M. Cherry. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold so brave, and so loving. And I'll invite you to join me in saying the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace, return in love.